الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر ولله الحمد. سبحان الله الذي من علينا بنعمة الإسلام والذي هدانا وما كنا لنهتدي لولا أن هدانا الله، والصلاة والسلام على محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه ومن تبعه بإحسان إلى يوم الدين. The beauty of having faith in our hearts, the beauty of having Islam in our hearts is nothing short than the beauty of wisdom itself. The beauty of capturing the essence of existence, the essence of our being in an act, in a state of consciousness, a state of consciousness in which one is reconciled with oneself and all that is around oneself, in other words, with the world around them, is reconciled with others, with nature, with existence, and ultimately reconciled with the truth of the end of existence, death, and reconciled with the truth of reincarnation, rebirth, and ba'ath, to stand before your Maker in a complete state of transparency. And with transparency, of course, comes accountability. This simple statement, this simple truth, that if you are endowed with faith, if you have the grace of faith in your heart, if you have Islam in your heart, you have, in truth, in reality, what you have is nothing less than the key to a great treasure. And that treasure is hikmah, wisdom. It's hikmah, which Allah describes in His book as خيرا كثيرا ومن أوتي الحكمة أوتي خيرا كثيرا. A great deal of good is a treasure that allows you to be aware of who you are, what you are, where your limits are, and the boundaries of others begin, who you are, and what existence around you is, who you are, what life that before you, the life that is before you and the life that has passed you means and ultimately who you are, and that moment in which the soul leaves the body and you become something else. Anyone who has seen the body after the soul has left it, they know they see something else other than a living human being. It's nearly indescribable, but something that will disintegrate, rot, and vanish, change its very material being. But the treasure is to be reconciled with that inevitability. And the treasure is to know that your truth is that you will come to consciousness again before God, and when you do, you will stand in complete transparency, in complete truth before your Lord. Many of you asked me, why is it that some find why is it that some say that your khutbahs are difficult to understand and inaccessible? And this is not in my defense, this is a critical point to reflect and to absorb. You could approach two people, and you approach those two people and you say to them one word: pursue wisdom. اتبعوا الحكمة. Follow suit in the way of wisdom. The first person has given thought to wisdom before, has given thought to the idea of wisdom, to the truth of wisdom, to the demands of wisdom. The first person has read the Quran and noticed that over many times, revelation is always co-joined with wisdom. يؤتى الكتاب أو أوتي الكتاب والحكمة. The God speaking to human beings says, I've sent you the book and hikmah. I've sent you the book and wisdom. أوتي الكتاب أنزل عليه الكتاب والحكمة وأنزلنا عليكم الكتاب والحكمة. Revelation and wisdom and hikmah. The first person still has noticed that and has thought about, why is revelation invariably tied to this great gift of wisdom? The first person knows that when it comes to Allah telling us how to explain our faith to others, how to approach others, how to talk to others, that Allah tells us, and ud'u ila sabili rabbika بالحكمة والموعظة الحسنة. Call upon the way of your Lord. Invite people to the path of your Lord. He didn't say through good advice first, but said through hikmah, through wisdom and good advice. إلى سبيل ربك بالحكمة والموعظة الحسنة. بالحكمة, through the path, through the approaches, the methodologies, through the process, through the language of wisdom and good advice, or moral al-hasana, whether you translate it as good advice or through gentle advice or through. So when we in fact have to explain what is it that our religion is about, we find at the heart of what we address people, at the heart of not just how we address people, but at the heart of what we explain to people, is that we have been given al-kitab wal-hikmah. We have been given revelation and wisdom. We have been, and given means that we have been called upon to submit to accept, to believe in, to adopt God's revelation and God's wisdom, or wisdom in we can have many conversations about it. But anyway, that's the first person. The second person has always read it, but as the Prophet ﷺ said, there are Muslims who read the book and it does not penetrate beyond the light of their eye. In other words, they just see it, they see the word and they go on. They have never given any thought to why revelation is always coupled with wisdom. They have not given any thought to what does it mean to tell people, you want to understand what is Islam about? Islam is about wisdom. They have never given any thought to why Allah says that that whoever is given this gift of wisdom, it's as if being given the key to great treasures. And so the first person says, oh, it's wonderful you are mentioning wisdom, because I have long thought about that. And so what you say is of great interest and is accessible to them. It's in fact welcome to them. The second person finds what you say completely alien, not because you are inventing a language that doesn't exist, not because you are introducing concepts that are difficult to comprehend, but because you mention what they have not invested time in learning in the first place, and they have become complacent in whatever inheritance they received as Islam, and that's what they want what they want to be satisfied with, and they do not want the difficult task of thinking new thoughts or learning new learning, or even admitting that they do not have the wisdom to pursue wisdom, because that takes a lot of humility. Why do I mention this? And as those of course, you know me, not in the least interested in this is not about justifying oneself to others, because the truth of the matter is that you justify yourself to your Lord, but there is a critical point here, a critical point that I insist on. A critical point that modern science has and modern knowledge systems has affirmed and confirmed, but a critical point that has been part of wisdom from ages ago, centuries ago. A critical point, and that is a critical point that Allah alludes to when He talks about Pharaoh, the Pharaoh, and his obedient flock, and tells us that the Pharaoh treats his people as if they are nothing, and so they become nothing. That he treats them as if they deserve nothing better than to worship a despot, and so they look to nothing better. The critical point is summed up again in this critical concept of hikmah, wisdom. If you talk to people in a language that is degraded and diminutive, those people, unless they are self-challengers, and unfortunately many people just get into the habit of following patterns of existence, those people become themselves degraded and diminutive. If you speak to people as if they are unintelligent, in fact they become the embodiment of what you project onto them. If you speak to people in language that is broken and reduced to most simple terms, to the least common denominators, then those people come to thrive in mediocrity, thrive in internalizing that lack of an existence in which they are not challenged, and in which they do not grow, in which they do not develop, in which they do not elevate. And in fact, they will then demand, if anyone attempts to address them in any elevated style, they will say, why don't you come down to us? Instead of, we should always rise, because the nature of divinity, or the very nature of divinity, people notice that Allah has created sunan, Allah has created laws that are invariable as the laws of wisdom. Those laws say life is inseparable from movement. You do not move, you become static, you disintegrate and die. Life is inseparable from growth. You do not grow, you atrophy and become static and die. And that development is not simply physical, but even more so intellectual and spiritual. A Muslim existing in a state of wisdom is a Muslim who exists in a constant state of growth. Today, they are spiritually less than tomorrow. Their best days are not those that are behind them, their best days are those that are before them. A true Muslim is in a constant state, a true Muslim meaning a true Muslim with wisdom, with revelation, a kitab, wal hikmah, with revelation and wisdom, is in a constant state of motion and a constant state of growth, development. If they know something today, they want to know twice as much tomorrow, and 10 times as much after tomorrow, and 20 times as much after tomorrow. This is the nature of a true Muslim and true Islam, and the Islam that we invite other people to. The Islam that has become popular these days, in which Islam is a constant repetition of the same set of movements and a repetition of the same set of ideas and the same language day after day after day in monotonous atrophy, is not the Islam of revelation and hikmah. It is the Islam of stupidity and death. Stupidity and death. Brothers and sisters, your religion, we start our khutbah by thanking Allah for the gift of Islam. If the gift of Islam is for us to remain undeveloped day after day in our consciousness, in our intellect, in our spirituality, in our state of being, and to remain the same day after day, that is no gift at all. That's as if we are saying we have turned God's gift into something rotted, something static, something that by the laws of hikmah and the laws of nature. Remember, what does not move, what does not grow, atrophies and dies. It's as if we are thanking God, it's as if we are turning God's gift to poison and then saying we thank God for it. God doesn't give gifts of poison. God doesn't give gifts of death. God gives you the gift of wisdom, meaning growth and development. But let me tell you that the key to that movement of the kitab wal hikmah, of revelation and wisdom, the key to that state of movement and growth, the key to the state of Islam that we invite others to, is mahabbatillah, to love God. To love God, to fear God, that could very easily become static and unevolving and non-moving. That is what we require of little children and people with low spiritual and intellectual capacities. They understand nothing but the language of fear. So we say, fear God. Why? Because you are a poor individual who has not much in terms of spiritual potential or intellectual potential. But to love God is something else. To love God is something else. To love God is the very essence of revelation and hikmah and wisdom. اللهم اهدنا واصلح حالنا اللهم ائتنا الحكمة ونزل علينا بفضلك محبتك وحب محبتك يا الله. God send upon us, God first guide us and help us fix our hearts and fix ourselves and fix our spirits and give us and grant us your love and the love of your love. Allah, just touch it. بسم الله والحمد لله بسم الله والحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه ومن تبعهم بإحسان إلى يوم الدين. The key to the treasure of wisdom, to hikmah, is love. And love is by its nature non-static. By its nature, if it goes up, it must be worked on to go, if it goes down, rather, it must be worked on to go up. By its nature, it develops to infinity. By its nature, it has no limit. The love of your Lord, Muhabbatillah, is to be aware and to have full knowledge, as Allah tells us in His revelation, in Allah's revelation, that God is ever present with you. That if you are alone, God is your second. In fact, alone doesn't exist in the world of revelation and wisdom. Alone doesn't exist. You are never alone. If you are two, God is your third. If you are three, God is your fourth. And if you internalize, and here is where the movement and growth is, if you internalize that awareness, if you internalize that state of consciousness, step by step, through, again, movement and growth, movement and development, the energy of movement and development, through critical self-engagement, your consciousness grows from one day to another, and your understanding of the profound implication of God being ever present with you wherever you go and wherever you are and wherever you be. Your consciousness and your understanding of the profound implications of that increase as well. And your perception of your body, your heart, your mind, your perception of who others are and what they are, your perception of what time is and what space is, your perception of death itself grows from one day to another. I'll finish inshallah with this, but this requires another khutbah. The Prophet ﷺ, with a group of men and women, individuals, just like us, started a revolution in the world, and a spiritual revolution, an intellectual revolution, a revolution in consciousness and in the developmental stage of humanity, a revolution in civilization itself. You would truly lack any vestige of wisdom to think that the Prophet ﷺ started this with companions, men and women, who remained the same day after they converted to Islam. If they did not grow day after day, they would not have changed the world. If they did not sit in their place and demand that their heart and minds expand, Islam would not have been what it is today. But most of all, Islam through Rasul al-Islam, through the messenger of Islam, gave these men and women an understanding of themselves and their potential, and so they changed the world. The reason we are over 1 billion people but we have no impact upon our world is we exist in numbers but we are as if replicas of each other. We have no understanding of what we are, no love for our uniqueness. And because we have no love for our uniqueness, we fight with each other over egotistical minutia. And because of that, we are individuals, and the Prophet ﷺ said, we are as if nothing. Invest in the individual, in the person. Invest in the individual, not by turning every individual into a megalomaniac, because that's part of the problem, is that we think that power equals wisdom. In fact, quite often, it is power equals a lack of wisdom. The more power worldly power, you invest yourself with, the more your wisdom goes out the door. But you invest in individuals in terms of knowledge and the love of Allah, to teach them to love Allah, so that Allah is truly wherever they are and wherever they go. And you do what the Prophet did with his companions, with his men and women. You change the world. Allah, guide us to your wisdom. Guide us to a better understanding of your religion. Allah, guide us to your love, to understand that you are ever present with us, and that your love is as great as you are, and that loving you is loving an infinity of beauty, and that the love we invest in you, as you said and as you promised, is returned tenfold and 100-fold. وصلي وسلم على محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه وتمام بإحسان إلى يوم الدين وأقم الصلاة.
الله أكبر الله أكبر أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله. حي على الصلاة، حي على الفلاح، قد قامت الصلاة، قد قامت الصلاة. الله أكبر، الله أكبر، لا إله إلا الله.